state advertising critical voices to hold the powers something senior executives at the papers claim that in retaliation will lack media freedom that leads to the death of democracy.
Of the ruling government.
Once again, the Beef Brigade has taken law in its own hands in this country.
This is one of several viral videos showing violence by so-called cow vigilantes in India.
A resident of Haryana's Mewat district was transporting 2 cows in his vehicle when he was beaten to death.
Hello everyone, I am Vaishnavi. This short documentary is based on the topic religious intolerance. I, along with a group of 5 people, have tried to collect and analyze the viewpoints of various people that would be depicted in this documentary. Marx once quoted that religion is the opium of the people. He viewed religion as teaching people to accept their current lot in life, no matter how bad, while postponing the rewards and happiness to afterlife. Intolerance means unwillingness to put up with certain groups and individuals. Intolerance pre-captures the prejudices and the stereotype beliefs about a group and a predisposition to act negatively towards a group. Now let's see the viewpoints of various people.
To assess the extent of intolerance in India, we conducted a survey and we found that out of the 54 people who participated, as many as 31 marked very intolerant as their response. Now, according to you, where does religious intolerance in India stand today? Do you think that the religious intolerance in India has increased or decreased in the recent years? According to you, what is the reason behind it?
Because of the information or the content consumption on media has led to the polarization of political opinions, and that has led to people quite being intolerant these days.
We conducted a survey to know the level of religious intolerance in our country, to which we got 54 responses. Some of the questions faced were, do they feel comfortable in a group of people not sharing same religious beliefs as them, to which 77.8% people said yes, while the rest said no. The next question was, have they ever been suggested to avoid the people of different religions, to which 64.8% people said no, while the rest said yes. The follow-up question to it was, how often are they reminded about it? To which 35.2% people said less frequently, while the 3% of people said very frequently.
Next, we asked people, do they think that violence due to religious intolerance has increased or decreased in recent years? If so, why?
I think it has increased, because lately there have been more news articles recently. Not recently, for the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of extremist action. Generally, there is some sort of attacks on minority religions that seem to take place.
I think violence has decreased due to religious intolerance, as I've already stated that the main, I mean, social media has become one of the major thing which propagates this religious intolerance. And so most of the time, the things that take place on social media do not really have any serious consequences in real life. And so overall, I think on-ground violence has obviously decreased. I mean, you can compare it with obviously this is not the only reason. People are much more educated and they are much more sensitive nowadays. And so as the literature rate has increased and people have become more aware, the violence has obviously decreased. I mean, the recent case that I can think of is the Delhi riots that took place in this year only. Well, there were some deaths, but I mean, this could have been worse. I mean, I can't even compare it to the 2002 riots of Gujarat. So, I mean, I think the major cause is the major thing why it has decreased is because of how people have become a little bit more aware as the time has passed.
Next, let's see what people think could have been done differently to avoid what happened in Delhi riots.
Well, Delhi riots. Well, the government was ready, although I mean the government was ready to step in and to take control of the situation if it got out of hand, and hence I think a lot of so I think the situation was mostly in control. I mean, as far as the government is concerned, it was the part which was related to people. Um, I mean, the police was always there. I mean, it's never like the police did not do work, and hence there was, I mean, misunderstanding. I mean, mishandling of the situation by the government. The government was well prepared. The government knew that the decision was going to incite, I mean, some kinds of riots, and so the government was fully prepared. It's just that the people were not completely aware. So I mean, obviously sentiments were hurt when the law was passed, and better could have been done to spread general awareness about what the actual I mean what the actual bill was. When the riots were raging, I everyone saw in news and newspapers that most of the people who were participating in riots, who were a part of riot, didn't even know the complete CA rules and those all those acts. So I mean, there was obviously a lack of awareness. I mean, there could have been a better awareness campaign, and the situation could have hence been better than how it was.
Next, we ask some people how media, education, government, and communal misunderstanding contribute to religious intolerance and the violence related to it.
So, do you think, I mean, that we have Christian schools and maybe some Hindu schools, I guess. So, do you think like the concept of a school being a school following, for example, the Christian beliefs is a good thing?
I think it's generally a bad idea. Like in those kind of schools, like for example, I don't think you're Christian, right?
No, I'm not Christian.
In that scenario, you got forced, shoved some Christian, how do you call practices
Yeah.
as a kid. That's not necessarily a bad thing if you think of it like that, but it kind of like the other people, like the Christians in that school, will end up taking some sort of bias because their environment in school is centered around Christianity, and home also is centered around Christianity. And if they're not like familiar, they don't get familiarized with other religious practices, and if there are some contradictions in different religions and their practices, so if they're not if they don't experience them as kids, then when they grow up, that will just uh, cause a lot of disagreement and uh, aggravation for those kind of people.
Do you think, like, what factor do you think is more important?
They definitely need to be in like kids need to be in an environment where they interact with other kids of other religions, and that creates like equality. They have this mindset that okay, these people are also equal to me, they're not different in any other way. And if you make them experience these different contradicting practices sooner in their life, then it's easier to like let them get used to it, because once people grow up, they stick very strongly to their beliefs, and yeah, they can't they're unmovable at that point. Another thing is education also to an extent should not have that kind of bias. Like my opinion is we should avoid having these religion specific schools, uh, and let people follow their religion. Like don't command them to do something that they don't follow.
Media, well, I mean, I think media is the biggest factor. I mean, as I already said that it is all about it is mostly about awareness, and hence if media propagates some agenda, uh, and let's say some channels um, do this thing for a specific party, uh, for let's say vote banks or other things, then it can be a really huge problem. Let's talk about national media or let's say newspapers. They have a wide variety of audience. I mean, in millions. So I mean, everyone watches TV channels at home while eating food or while taking dinners. So I mean, they obviously have a huge impact. I mean, whatever they say, whatever the anchors or the people that come on a news channel say, they leave a huge impact on people, and they should really be responsible and careful with whatever words or sentences they use, because whatever they say can incite people. People may feel better or worse related to their sentiments, religious sentiments. It all depends upon. I mean, a huge factor depends on media. I mean,
Like communal misunderstanding is something where when you have two different communities and some other external party is kind of aggravating this uh, already tight situation between those two communities. So uh, that can happen through some external party. Like I said, that could be the government or the media, or that can like in certain reporters can have their own bias towards certain religion's practice. So that can end up being put forth in the news, and that can also stir people to like rise up and protest more. It can have that kind of effect that just activates the situation. And government's case, government generally, again, it can depend on the party. Like for example, Bharatiya Janata Party uh, can be very pro-Hindu, but even if you're talking about a neutral government, they still need to act on situation fast enough. That is that. If they don't, then it just like they need to kind of mediate these kinds of issues, the government, instead of just letting them like stay idle.
Yeah.
Education. Well, education also plays an important role. I mean, not as important as media, but even education plays an important role. Obviously, if people are much more educated, then they are much more less likely. Then they're much less likely to use violence in any form. So, so obviously, literate people. I mean, if someone is educated, then he would think twice before participating in any type of thing in any type of. I mean, in performing any type of religious intolerance at all, because they would take well informed decisions, I hope. And so, I mean, it is obviously implied that a better education, a better literacy rate would contribute towards religious tolerance.
According to a survey in which factors that led to the increase in the tolerance were graded on a scale of 0 to 4. Most of the people graded media, communal misunderstanding, and extremist beliefs as 4, and less number of people graded education and unemployment as 4. Applying functionalist theory here, we can comment that the different sections of a society, namely media, government, police, and education system, are supposed to perform their functions such that the society is in a normal state, which in present means an ideal society free from religious intolerance. The failure to do so is regarded as dysfunction and contributes to the abnormal state of violence. Another question is that how is religious intolerance has affected India today?
I think it very much affects India today. Like, uh, I would like to take the example of Islam. Like, people think that radical Muslim groups, they target people from other religious groups, but as evident from the past also, like these radical Muslim groups, their first target are liberal Muslims, which do not abide by the conventional Muslims rules or the modernization of Islam, if one would say. like Malala Yousafzai being one of the examples targeted by Talibanis or radical Muslim groups like that. So we can see that such radicalization is happening with Hinduism today. Like radical Hindu groups, if I were to name one, RSS and their supporters, right-wing parties, they are kind of targeting liberal Hindu thinkers or the people who believe in secularism or support Muslims. And we have seen recently that in South India, one of liberal writers was murdered by a Hindu. So I think it really does affect. It really is affecting India right now. It is an important issue which needs to be handled by the government, and their silence on this matter is only aggravating this dangerous situation.
Intolerance captures prejudices and stereotypes of a certain group, and these have been studied from various theoretical perspectives like social identity theory, group conflict theory, and integrated threat theory. Common to these approaches is the notion that the negative outgroup evaluations are related to a strong in-group identity and a sense of social self. Such prejudiced evaluations of the outgroup may be a function of various factors, including realistic threats to the in-group interest, like in-group and outgroups competing for resources. Then we have symbolic threats based on perceived groups' different beliefs, values, or notions. Then we also have the negative stereotyping of the outgroup. For example, them being perceived as hostile or greedy or violent. And lastly, we have intergroup anxiety, which refers to a person's experiences of feeling threatened by the members of the outgroup. All these factors may shape negative evaluations of religious groups. And thus, to come up with a solution, we first need to understand the nature of the intolerance and how it emerges in a social situation. What circumstances lead to the violence?
Intolerance, as well as tolerance, implies social inequality. Relationships between groups in society always incorporate a power imbalance. If a group's position in society is not contested, then tolerance would not be needed. Now, which groups tolerate and which groups are tolerated can also be seen as a reflection of social hierarchy of groups in society. Awareness of unequal power relations underlying intolerance is crucial to understand changes in tolerance levels as well as the shifts in objects of intolerance over time. Determinants of tolerance include socioeconomic status, age, regional differences, religion, etc. And generally, people with a higher socioeconomic status, older rather than adolescent people, and people living in cities rather than in rural areas are believed to be more tolerant. However, systemic meta analyses of these demographic variables are absent. What we see is that regional differences appear to be rooted in other variables, such as liberalism versus conservatism. What is to be noted here is that the local norms have a much greater impact on individual tolerance.
One theory that can be applied to explain religious intolerance is social identity complexity theory. Social identity complexity of a person refers to the degree of overlap perceived to exist between groups of which that person is simultaneously a member. According to the theory, individuals with higher social identity complexity often conceptualize their social identity in such a way that others who share any salient dimension of identity are considered part of the in-group. Conversely, individuals with low social identity complexity often conceptualize their own sense of identity such that others must share all relevant characteristics of identity to be considered members of the in-group. Whether a person develops a high or low level of social identity complexity is affected by a variety of factors. Experience with groups outside of one's social categories, tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity, and openness to change have been correlated with a higher degree of social identity complexity. Conversely, little experience of diversity, stress, a need for closure, and in-group threat have been found to negatively affect social identity complexity. Our studies have shown that individuals with a higher degree of social identity complexity are far more likely to be tolerant of differences and members of outgroups. They recognize that membership in their in-groups rely upon multiple levels of identification rather than excluding outsiders straight away. In contrast, individuals individuals with a low degree of social identity complexity are more likely to be intolerant of differences. Their multiple layers of identity all reduced to a single expression of the in-group, outside of which they consider all others to be different.
In our survey, we also asked how will they describe their current self, to which shockingly 13% of people said they have never thought about it before. So before ending, we would like to ask you, have you ever thought about it? Thank you.